Advanced look controls, or ALC settings, is one of the most talked about topics in the Apex community. I've seen lots of videos of people trying to explain what ALC is, and some are pretty good, some are pretty bad. A lot of people just honestly don't understand what they're talking about. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what each ALC setting does, why each of them matter, and why I think everyone should be using ALC in order to fine-tune their sensitivity. So to look at the default sensitivity settings before we get into ALCs, we'll be able to see what ALCs really revolve around. We need to understand this before we get into the more advanced settings. So mine are kind of grayed out because I do have ALCs enabled, but it's very straightforward. You have your look sensitivity when you're not ADS'd, your look sensitivity where you are ADS'd, you have your per optic settings if you want to change your sensitivity based on what scope you have on your weapon. Then you have your response curve, which is probably the least understood and most talked about thing, and probably the thing you can change the most with ALC settings. And then you have your look dead zone, which is also a pretty big deal, and I've seen lots of videos talking about that. If you look at your response curve and look dead zone, there are only 5 settings for a response curve, and there's only 3 settings for your look dead zone. So for sensitivity, the top 2 things, this is the setting that is going to be least affected by your ALCs. You know, you can get by with running a 4.3 or a 3.3 or a 5.4 or a 5.3, anything like that. Anybody can learn to use any of the basic sensitivity settings. That's not where the value of ALC comes from for the most part. Where the value of ALC comes from is in the response curve and the look dead zone. Because in the normal settings, there's 5 settings for response curve, and honestly, most of them are garbage. So really, most people vary between classic and linear with no in between. And then look dead zone, there's none, small, and large, which is not a great option for a FPS shooter on controller. Almost every new FPS shooter has it to where you can make minute changes to your dead zone, which is extremely important. A lot of people are talking about how 4.3 linear with no dead zone is the move right now because you're able to make those micro movements much better. I tried that. The problem is different controllers have different levels of stick drift. So what you have the option of doing with ALC is going into your ALC settings and making your sensitivity and response curve exactly like this would be, but fine-tuning your dead zone in order to make it the perfect number so that you're not getting stick drift that isn't manageable, but you're still able to make those micro adjustments. Because having none dead zone on a controller with a lot of stick drift is not going to do very much for you. Having none dead zone on a controller with no stick drift is in effect the same exact thing of customizing your dead zone for a controller with any amount of stick drift. Because when you perfectly set up your dead zone, the moment you move your stick, you're going to be getting those micro adjustments without all the stick drift that's involved if you use none dead zone. We're going to hop into each of these settings and just break them down one at a time. Most of them are pretty straightforward. There are a couple of settings you'll see here that aren't on the normal settings, like turning extra yaw and pitch and ramp up time and ramp up delay. So starting with dead zone is very self-explanatory. You need to set your dead zone up, start it at 0, and then gradually increase your dead zone so that you're not getting stick drift. Or you're not getting much stick drift, and then stop it right there, because that's where you're going to be able to have the most precise micro aiming adjustments without the effect of stick drift on your aim or the hassle of having to try and wrestle with stick drift like a lot of people are suggesting that you do. Go in ALC, set up your dead zone to be gradually, slowly, one number at a time increased until you get to a point where you have no stick drift, and leave it right there at the tip of that. Your outer threshold is effectively the opposite of your dead zone. So your dead zone is the minor movements. The outer threshold is the maximum movement. So you could think of it like Call of Duty has it as your minimum input and maximum input. Most people are going to want your maximum input to be as low as possible. But you don't want to just throw it down to 1% or 0, because some controllers aren't going to register that all the way to the edge. So if you're using extra yaw or pitch, if you have this too low, that extra yaw and pitch will never kick in, because as you can see in the description, this is going to be the width of the outer range of your maximum input. But when you reach this boundary is also where the extra yaw and pitch settings are going to kick in. So the outer threshold is important to have, and I tried putting it, up in the middle, but it made it to where my extra yaw and pitch was kicking in too fast, and it made me a little inaccurate. So you want to keep it about at the default, honestly, unless you see that your extra yaw and pitch is never kicking in. And then your response curve is going to be where people are talking about linear versus classic. 0 response curve, if you don't know, is going to be linear. It's just straight up and down all the way through. 10 is going to be classic. So if you want one of those, then you can use one of those. I've settled on 6. That's just what feels the best to me. I've been playing Call of Duty my whole life. I've never played on linear in Call of Duty, so linear just doesn't feel good to me in Apex. It feels a little weird, like I can't control like I want to, but classic feels a little too clunky because I, on COD, play on dynamic or the reverse S curve. What I've found is best that simulates that reverse S dynamic is these settings, and the response curve on 6 gives a good balance of moving quickly like it's linear on big adjustments and things like that, but still able to make those minor adjustments without sensitivity shifting too much. So this is where I've settled on, but again, this is something, if you want linear, go 0, 1, or 2. If you want classic, go 10. You probably don't want to go above 10. And for a lot of people, if you're using ALCs, sitting somewhere between the 4 to 8 range is going to be where you find the most success. But again, this isn't something I can tell you to do. This is something where you're going to have to just research and trial and error until you find exactly what works best for you. Hopping down to the yaw and pitch settings, this is where a lot of people mess up their ALC settings by going out the wazoo with it. There's a graphic I'm going to put on the screen right now that actually shows a sensitivity conversion for normal sensitivity settings to ALC sensitivity settings. So 4.3 in normal sensitivity felt pretty good to me. So what I did was in ALC, I converted that 4.3 to my yaw speed, pitch speed, and then ADS yaw and pitch speed as well. And this is about what I came out to. It might be a couple of ticks off, but in the grand scheme of things, those couple of ticks aren't going to change very much. So whatever sensitivity you found in your normal settings that works well for you, convert that into ALC, whether it be 3.3, 4.3, 5.3, 5.4, whatever it may be, and use those settings here for your yaw speed, pitch speed, and then your ADS yaw and pitch speed as well. But when it comes to your turning extra yaw and turning extra pitch, this is where you get into settings that you get to have in ALC that you don't get to have in normal settings, and it changes the game completely. So your turning extra yaw is going to, and pitch and ADS, all these work the same way. When you reach your controller to the max dead zone, like we talked about earlier, the maximum movement, your turning extra yaw will then kick in, and your turning extra pitch will then kick in, as well as when you're ADSing. So this is going to help you have more, be able to simulate the more extreme movements of having a mouse, where you're able to make those micro movements with a lot of control, while at the same time moving really, really, really quickly in order to track people up close, or if you're somebody sprinting and you're ADSing, tracking them while you're ADSing. These are the settings that are going to make that possible and simulate more of a well-rounded sensitivity experience. So I have my turning extra yaw almost maxed out. 250 felt a little fast, so I just turned it down to 240, and it feels perfect. I'm able to loot quickly, and if I'm in an up-close fight with a shotgun or a Prowler or a R99 and I'm not zooming in and people are sprinting left and right really fast, I'm able to keep up with them, but not at the expense of my normal yaw speed. Because my normal yaw speed will always be, unless I fully extend my stick one way or another. And when I fully extend my stick to keep up with someone, that's when my extra yaw kicks in and I'm able to track much, much better. So that's what turning extra yaw and pitch is going to accomplish for you, is just give you much better tracking on targets that are moving faster, that isn't dismissing or isn't at the expense of your normal yaw and pitch speed and your normal ADS speed. And this is the thing that makes ALC so good. And I think it puts you at a disadvantage if you don't use ALC. A lot of people say there's way too much stuff to input here. Not when you understand all of these three things, and your yaw, pitch, and ADS yaw and pitch can be directly translated from the normal settings to these settings. I could simulate a 4-3 linear extremely easily if I wanted to. But I could also, at the same time, as I'm simulating that 4-3 linear, give myself a more precise dead zone, give myself a more well-rounded ability to track up close and far away, slow and fast movements with my extra yaw and extra pitch speed. So it's a no-brainer to use ALC, especially with those conversion charts that you're able to use. So the last two things we need to focus on are the turning ramp up time and ramp up delay. So I have my delay on 0 because when I get to the edge of my stick pull, I don't want it, 2 seconds later to randomly kick in for when my sensitivity is going to be faster. As soon as my stick hits the edge of my movement, I want to know this is where my sensitivity is going up. It makes it much more consistent, much easier to fight that way. So you want your ramp up delay to be on 0. As far as ramp up time, this is something that has a little more variance to it, and you can pick based on your preference. As you can see, the normal ramp up time is at like 33%, I think. For me, this was the biggest thing that made it hard to play without ALCs on, because the ramp up time was too much and I wasn't able to get those really fast tracking movements in as fast as I wanted to be. So I turned mine down to 13%, 10%. The ADS turning ramp up time is 100%, which is just absolutely insane. So I turned it down from 100 to 10, which makes my game feel much snappy. It almost makes my ADS aiming feel much more linear while being on a 6 response curve and still able to make those fine-tuned adjustments up close. So this 10% and 13%, again, is just my preference. This feels more like Call of Duty to me than Apex, the 13 and 10% ramp up time. I think the ramp up time is what makes aiming tricky on this game. So if you're struggling to aim and you've played other FPSs before on controller with aim assist, then turn down your ramp up time in your ALCs. I have my normal one on 13, which from 10 to 15 is pretty much all going to feel pretty similar, and my ADS time on 10%, so that it's really, really quick, and it's not happening instantly, but it's progressing really, really quickly, so that I'm not missing out on tracking opportunities, and I'm able to have a lot of fine control over what I'm doing. But that's all the ALC settings that are in the game. Like I said before, it's not difficult. Dead zone, outer threshold, response curve can all be perfectly and easily simulated from the normal sensitivity settings, but with much more precision. Yaw speed, pitch speed, ADS yaw speed, and pitch speed can be completely simulated with exact precision from normal settings, but then you're able to go in with the extra yaw and pitch, and then the ramp up time and delay, and make it exactly how it fits you based on your experience and what you want. These are the settings I use. These are the settings I would suggest anyone to use who's played on 4-3, but it just doesn't feel quite right. This is what I use, but I would encourage everyone to use ALC. It's not too complicated. It's not hard to understand. You just have to put in a little bit of time, find out exactly what feels great to you, make minor adjustments here and there until you find what feels just fantastic for you. So that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you did. And let me know what you want to see in the future. I plan on releasing a lot more Apex content in the days and weeks to come. So drop a like, drop a subscription, turn on post notifications, and it really helps me out a lot. So I appreciate it. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.